Fast 10 is finally out in theaters now, and if you're clicking on this video, that means you want to see my ranking of the Fast and the Furious movies from worst to best. That's 11 films we're going to rank today. I'm very excited to do this. I like this franchise quite a bit. Some of these movies I even love, and with this brand new installment, it was kind of tricky to see where I was going to place it, so we're going to have fun doing that. I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section, so make sure to leave your ranking down there. Hit that like and subscribe button for more movie-related movie reviews, ranking, reactions, whatever you want to say it is. I do all of that over on this channel, and if you are new here, this is certainly the channel for you guys. We're trying to hit 50,000 subs by the end of this year. I think we can do it, so let's push for it, and without further ado, let's start this ranking right now. My number 11 is Tokyo Drift. Now, this movie, I know there's a lot of people who will probably just go, Zach, that is blasphemy. Why is this in last place? For me, it's just never really stuck out. I think there's some cool racing moments to it. I actually really dig the cinematography, but the story itself, I actually find to be the weakest out of all the Fast and the Furious movies. This film lacks in that department. It was trying to like reboot and retool the franchise to a certain extent without its main characters whatsoever, and that wasn't really working. Sean Boswell is an interesting character, but at the same time is not really given enough meat and bones to push and jump forward. And they continue to do that, and for me, Tokyo Drift just really doesn't know exactly what it wants to be in this realm, and by the end of the movie, of course, Vin Diesel is back and kind of hinting towards a fourth film. He ended up getting, which that fourth film was pretty much the retooling and the reboot that they actually did want in this franchise. Every time I've gone back and rewatched this one, which is not too often, I really only like Han, and Han is, for me, the best character in this entire film. We get into my number 10, which is Too Fast, Too Furious. Kind of the same thing of the third film that we just talked about, Tokyo Drift, but in this one, thankfully, at least we have Brian Connor in here, Paul Walker's character. Now, I like this movie. I think this one is fun for what it is, and it definitely is a product of its time, but the film is overly cheesy. It has a terrible villain to it, and I think overall, like, while it's a nice introduction to Roman and Tej, and it's kind of funny seeing like where these two characters come from, and now we see like where Tej is like this super hacker and all these sorts of things. It's always funny to see that shit in the later films, but Too Fast, Too Furious is overall a generic sequel that is surprising that it even released in theaters, because in some ways it kind of feels like a straight to DVD sequel that you get back in this time zone. And again, good music, fun car racing, fun action. It's literally what the first movie was, but just trying to do that without two of the main characters, or three of the main characters technically. It literally is only Paul Walker's character and brand new characters to this scenario. And again, interesting stuff that you could do there. When you watch this movie, it lacks a lot of that stuff, and I think the Fast and the Furious movies are better when the team is actually all together and working, or in general when we just have all the characters in the film itself, and I think you see that in the latter installments as well. Which brings me to my number 9, which is F9, Fast and Furious 9. Now, I know this one, when I first came out, I was like, this is not the worst in the Fast and Furious franchise, and I still contend it is not the worst. I know some people were saying it was destroyed the franchise, killed it, whatever you want to say it is. I have best friends who said that. Griffin, I'm looking at you from Film Speak. Trust me, man, I get your hate, but I didn't think it was that bad. The thing about F9, it did start to kill some of my excitement for the future of the Fast and Furious movies, and particularly, I wasn't too excited going into Fast 10 because of this film. A lot of that can be chalked up to, I think, them using John Cena very poorly. They did not go to John Cena's strengths. Then they misused Cypher. Once again, Charlize Theron is absolutely worthless in this film. And they went to space, which absolutely just made me lose brain cells. Like, that's when I checked out. I thought, this is stupid. I know there's been a lot of stupid things in this franchise, but that was like the dumb thing, and there's a certain self-aware elements in here that they never really went further in on in this. But what I did like about this movie was the fact that family was front and center again. The family was put together to stop Dom's younger brother, and the way that they kind of intersected that, went back into Vin Diesel's past, I liked all those elements. I thought that was unique and interesting. I liked Michael Rooker's character and how that developed in there. There's a lot of good and interesting ideas to further out the story. While I think it's, again, we can always joke around that, like, of course there's a long lost brother in Dom's lineage. That's fine to make fun about. but I do like that the family element was strong. I think some of the action sequences are a blast in here, and that's just the continuing element of it all. I think the third act gets a little bit too big for its britches, and overall, it just still felt like they didn't know what to do after Furious 7. When Paul Walker had passed away, sadly, it really just, this and 8, you're going to hear that about, is that there didn't seem to be a direction that they wanted the story to go in. And it felt like each film they were just trying to up the ante to surpass the last one's insanity, but never carrying along the story that makes that insanity go along with it. I think if we want to look at a franchise that does this particularly very well, is the Mission Impossible franchise. Each film, the stunts have gotten bigger and better, as well as the story has gotten bigger and better, but alongside following our main character. Where the Fast and Furious franchise was not able to do that with 9, it just got bigger and stupider, but left behind everything else that also made this franchise important and special, and that is the characters. While you have fun with them, and left behind anything really meaty to that all. Particularly, I think in this film, if John Cena was not the villain and he was just a new crew member, I think that maybe would have worked a little bit better for here. Now, my number 8 is The Fate of the Furious. This is, again, the first one right after Paul Walker's sad, tragic death. And this is the brand new one without Mia or Brian. And it was an interesting installment going into there. So this one easily pits Hobbs versus Vin Diesel once again. How do you do that? Well, you gotta pit The Rock against his whole team so Hobbs can recruit them all. And that's my biggest issue with this movie, is the family's not together. The family is separated, and again, you're losing the sense of what makes this film franchise so special. Now, I do like the development of Elena actually having a mysterious kid of Dom's, and that now being a part of it, and absolutely how that ties into him and Letty's relationship. And for me, you know, there's elements in here that I can watch and I'm like, this is fun. I think Dwayne Johnson really does elevate a lot of moments particularly in this film. And to be honest, I actually think Hobbs is one of the best aspects of this franchise. Particularly the way that they use him in this movie is some of the best stuff that they've used to him at all. Because he is leading Dom's crew and they're trying to figure out what is going on between Dom and how this is all working. While at the same time, Vin Diesel is trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. So again, you separate the team, you make it separate. The team thinks Dom hates him. Dom's not trying to screw them over, but he has a lot of other issues going on. And I liked what they did with Cypher in here. I think she is very menacing. I wish they would have followed through with that. In F9, she should have just continued to be the main antagonist of this entire series. I think 8 introduced cool elements, had a lot of awesome, fun moments to it, but still lacked that direction that this franchise was truly needing after F7. And in my eyes, after seeing Fast 10, I actually wish Fast 10 would have immediately come after Fast and Furious 7. I think that's where this would have gone. Maybe done one more thing to kind of build and gap that bridge with certain new characters to introduce. But with that said, 8, it's a fun installment. I needed a little bit more there.
And wheel to the left really quickly.
Now we get into my number 7, which is Hobbs and Shaw. This film I go a little bit back and forth on. Now, initially, this is a film that I was very hyped for. Hobbs and Shaw, that's such a cool and fun spin-off idea to do in the Fast and Furious world. Then you have Idris Elba, Vanessa Kirby joining the cast as well. That's fantastic. I'm very hyped for this. Now, on the marketing side, this still sticks with me. This film was ruined by the trailers, and maybe that shouldn't judge a film on that and why it's so low on my list, because I know a lot of people will probably have this a little bit higher, but that was like one part. Like, I felt like they showed too much of this film. And then when I went and watched it, this is like Mission Impossible spy stuff in the Fast and Furious franchise with Hobbs and Shaw. And the action in this film, I actually will go as far to say, is the best hand-to-hand combat that we've seen in this franchise. I also will go as far to say there's one too many cameos in this movie. Like, we got Ryan Reynolds, Kevin Hart. The franchise just continues from there. Too much a little bit. Would not have liked that. I understand it's probably just building up, and to be honest, if we ever get a sequel, I would be absolutely shocked if we don't see those two characters join the main crew of Hobbs and Shaw. And that's about it. Like, my issues really stem from this movie just feeling a bit generic, and I also really didn't like where they went with the superhero aspect of Idris Elba. They're starting to get a little bit too far-fetched. F7 was the perfect amount of jumping the shark. Hobbs Shaw just takes it way too extreme. Now, if I want to take that away and just look at everything else that we get here, it's a fun overall package. It's a predictable one. I think the story's a little bit choppy and it's where it's trying to get to, but every time I watch it, I do have a smile. Hobbs Shaw, Jason Statham, and Dwayne Johnson have amazing chemistry with one another. Vanessa Kirby was actually a big standout in here, and I love, love, love her in this movie. I think she's actually one of the most underrated characters when it comes down to this entire universe, and I like this movie. It's not one I like to go back and rewatch, but I do enjoy this one quite a bit, and I think it's overly long, but so what? Almost all these films are. Now, my number 6 is Fast and Furious, or Fast and Furious 4. This is, again, that retooling, that reboot that they tried to get the franchise started back up. That's what Justin Lin did here, and it absolutely kicked off from here, because ever since here, it's been a pretty consistent ride for the most part. And 4, for me, I like. I actually used to hate this one. This used to actually be my least favorite. But once now I've seen where we are at and going back and revisiting this one, I kind of like it a little bit more. It seems like the most generic out of most of the Fast and Furious movies, if I'm being a little bit honest there. But I do like the whole story structure. I like the villain. I like how Paul Walker's character comes back into Vin Diesel's life, and of course Mia's. And I like what they ended up doing with Letty, even though it was very shocking and it happens really early on, and I wish that would have been like something that kind of continued throughout the whole franchise. There's a lot of interesting and fun ideas here, and I think as a direct sequel to the original Fast and Furious movie, this is a good one that continues from that franchise and where our characters were left off at. And I think this is kind of that nice segue to start up and get us into 5, 6, and 7, which is arguably some of the best in the entire franchise as well. I don't have much to say about Fast and Furious 4 because it kind of just sits in that middling arc where I'm like, yeah, I really like it, but it's also not too memorable. It's just one of those ones that I do like going back and rewatching, and there's a lot of fun ideas. And I do like the whole cartel sequence when they're going through the desert and they're going through the cave tunnel. That was intense. Now we're at my number 5, which is Fast 10, the brand new installment. This is of course part 1 to how many installments they make for this next trilogy of finale or whatever they're trying to do. Fast 10 for me though is the savior of this family, and in general the savior of my excitement for the Fast and Furious franchise. Like I mentioned when I talked about F9, that movie started to kill my excitement. I wasn't too excited going into Fast 10. Fast 10's first trailer was interesting. I liked that it was harkening back to 5, 6, and 7, and that's what I was hoping to get from this movie. And overall, they don't totally jump the shark, but they go right then and there, like kind of in that middling ground where they have a fine light direction. They know where they want to go. They know what the direction is now, and the stunts aren't as big. They're on the scale of Furious 7, and for me, that is a pro. Because now they can give a little bit more to some of the characters, the moments, and at least the story and what they are trying to set up here. Is it maybe a little bit Infinity War-ish? A lot of action? Absolutely. Like that, there's no doubt about it. It's very easy to compare this film to Avengers Infinity War because of the way that they structured it, with tons of action, with splitting the characters up into different locations and different elements having to go on, and really much the way that the film leaves off. Now, spoiler alert, if you have not watched the movie yet, we're going to talk about a couple things, but the giant cliffhanger they have, I actually really loved. And the return of 2 characters, Gal and Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne, it's interesting. That makes me happy. Gal, I'm a little bit puzzled by that, on how that worked, but whatever. They'll explain it in some stupid manner in the next movie. And that's where Fast 10 just interests me. It's super fun, and it's always exciting and energetic throughout the entire runtime, and I have a blast with that. And I'm now more excited for part 2, specifically where they left off on cliffhanger, which I know they'll fix right in the beginning of this film. May I say the beginning of the next part. From that element moving forward, I think now they'll be able to focus in a little bit more back onto that dramatic, melodramatic element that they have in a lot of the Fast and Furious movies, and continue to plan instead of just going gun-ho into all these scenarios and all the characters being split up. I think they'll be once again back, and that's kind of the thing with how Endgame was. So I'm hoping that's what they can really much finalize in the next part. Again, if part 2 sucks, part 1 drops a huge heavy heavel. But I'm going off and basing this ranking and basing my excitement off of my enjoyment of this and what I think was good initial setup. Two things I kind of want to just bullet point is Jason Momoa, hands down, best Fast and Furious villain. And then just kind of a little bit of things. I do think there are way too many characters in this movie, which is one of the reasons why it's not higher up on this list. I also do think some of the visual effects are a little bit poor. And at times I know the director had left mid-production, and you can honestly tell. There are times where some of the sequences in here feel like there is no direction, it's aimless, and it's just really boring. And I don't give Luis, the director who came in on board later in the shoot, to why this was going on. I don't shit on him at all for this, because I do think since he is coming back for part 2, he could actually show us what he can do. And he's a really underrated director, so I wouldn't shit too much on him. We're at my number 4, which is the original The Fast and the Furious. This movie is a classic to many people, I understand. It is a Point Break ripoff at times, but the reason that this movie really works is because of the racing and particularly the characters. Now, I understand the Fast and Furious franchise has always been known to have this kind of melodramatic feel to it, and the Fast and Furious, the original, does have that melodramatic feel to it. It is a product of its time. A lot of these movies are products of its time, and specifically the blockbuster landscape that it was at that moment. And this movie works. It's kind of like that lightning in the bottle. You just totally hit it off the road. And while it is a ripoff to Point Break, it kind of still works. And I actually think the reason that this movie works so well is because the main character is not Vin Diesel. It's not Letty. It's not Mia. It is Brian O'Connor's Paul Walker. And I liked seeing this person working with the government to take down these VCR stealers. It always makes me laugh thinking about that. That's what they used to do. And him going between both paths. The criminal and, of course, the government agent. And I always, again, find that to be interesting. And while not deep, I love how he starts to find his own family in there. You can tell Brian has never had a family. And the way that him and Mia's relationship escalates. The way that he starts to really look up to Dom. These are elements that all work. And when Dom is pretty much the villain of the story, that's things that kind of play out. This was a great introduction to Michelle Rodriguez as Letty as well. And of course, Dominic Toretto. And I like this startup of the family. I like where this goes. And it's just really, it's a lot of fun. And it's beautiful in a lot of different ways. But in the same way, it's just, you really dig the characters. I really liked some of the action. And the street racing was a blast. Now we get to my number 3, which is Fast and Furious 6. And this is, for me, coming off Fast 5, you really had to nail this movie. And the way this movie nails it is, one, making Hobbs kind of bring the crew in and be like, we're going to have to work together. Second, making Luke Evans be the villain of the story, which hands down Luke Evans is the most underrated character in this franchise, and also just one of the most underrated actors in general. I'm a little bit annoyed that he's not used more in this franchise specifically. He's still alive. We saw him in The Fate of the Furious. Why are you not using him more? That guy is very underrated. Maybe he just doesn't want to come back. I don't know. I want more of Luke Evans in the Fast and Furious world, and I just want more of him as an actor. Days when I shift this back and forth, and this movie actually becoming my second favorite, or maybe even sometimes my first favorite. These first 3 are pretty interchangeable for me, but 6 for me, as of right now, just sitting here, I think Luke Evans is a great villain. I love the characters and the way that they kind of build off of 5, and the action that they decide to up the ante, not too far, not too heavy, but they move it just along, and the stakes are there. Letty's reintroduced back into here. I thought that was dumb, but it works, and whatever. We have Michelle Rodriguez back. The deaths of certain characters now kind of don't play off as well in here, I guess, but still, whatever. Every character comes back. It's like a superhero movie in a sense. But this is just one that had that perfect paced action. It's a great follow-up to Fast 5, which is what a lot of people argue is their favorite Fast and Furious movie. The way that the 6th movie really just continues to up the ante, continue that fun. I have a smile on my face every time I go back to rewatch this one. We get to my number 2, which is Furious 7. Now, this is the one where we had lost Paul Walker. Very much the ending of all the Shaw issues. It is where the franchise should have ended at. It is a beautiful tribute to Paul Walker. The way that James Wan really handled his loss, and the way that they restructured the film to still include him. And, not all the CGI is great, but it didn't need to be. I think as audience members, we can look at that and understand that this is the best thing they can do, and it is an emotional ride. This is the only Fast and Furious movie I have walked out of crying every time. Whether it's I See You Again, the music playing, the way that the roads diverge with Dom and Brian. I never want to see this character again. Brian. I never want to. I hope they never do CGI. I think it'll be absolute terrible. It'll be a terrible choice. They should never, never, never use that. Furious 7 for me, though, James Wan just fucking nailed it. And I love the action scenes in here. I talked about how Hobbs and Shaw has some of my favorite hand-to-hand combat. This kind of goes hand in hand here. I really love that opening fight scene between Hobbs and Shaw itself. And I love how he uses the throw over camera, how the camera rolls with everything. And you see that quite a bit in here. And even that final showdown between Shaw and Dom on the parking garage. And while it's overly insane with like the Vin Diesel like smashing the ground, it's so stupid. I dug it. And that's the thing. Furious 7, you see him going from skyscraper to skyscraper. The emotion is running through the action, the stakes. Everything felt so perfect in this movie that I really don't have too many issues with this one. I just go back and I just watch it and I enjoy the shit out of it and I have so much fun. And this is, I think the peak of the Fast and Furious franchise is 5, 6, and 7. But if we want to talk about my favorite Fast and Furious movie, it is my number one, Fast 5. Fast 5 is what actually got me back into this franchise, because I remember when this film was coming out, I was in track, I think in either high school or junior high, to be honest. I was very young when this movie came out. And I sat there, and all my team members wanted to go see this movie, and I did not want to go see it. I liked 1, but 2 and 3 just killed me. 4, I wasn't a huge fan of either. And I genuinely was just like, I don't want to waste my money. But somehow they convinced me to go. They paid for my ticket. We all went. And I ate my fucking words that night. That was one of the coolest movies I had seen at that point in time. And I went, wow, this is awesome. And since Fast 5, I started to get and refuel my energy back up for this franchise. And I'm like, okay, now I'm into this. Some of that can be said because of Dwayne Johnson and him being franchise Viagra and what he was able to add to this movie. Some of it can be said for what they just understood where this film wanted to be. It is an action franchise. That is what we look forward to it. And yes, the stunts and the car racing, yes, that is an element of why a lot of people come to it. But I come for the action. I come for set pieces like this. Plus, this is a giant heist movie. They're robbing the most rich person in Brazil, and they're going to drag a safe through all of Brazil in the final act. That's an amazing choice to do. And it breaks the logic of what cars can do, but it works so well. And then you continue and you bring together all the family that they've already met along the way in 1, 2. And, of course, even some characters in 3, and even introduce some new ones as well. And you bring this family together. It literally feels like Ocean's 10 or 11 or 12, but with fast-moving cars and Dominic Toretto's crew. And the Mi Familia and everything like that, they really just understood it all. And I love this movie wholeheartedly. I genuinely think this is one of the best action sequels of all time and one of my favorite action films of all time. It's just... if you're talking about lightning in a bottle, this is the lightning in a bottle effect that the franchise needed, absolutely, and it works in every single way. And that's exactly where this ranking needs to end. Go watch Fast 5, go watch Fast 6, watch Fast 7, and yes, Fast 10 is good, at least for now. We'll see where it continues from there. Thank you guys so much again for watching this. This is my Fast and Furious ranking. I appreciate each and every one of your guys' thoughts. Can't wait to read your guys' rankings down below. And if you want my full review on Fast 10, you can find that right now on my channel, so make sure to go look for that as well. I'll put a pinned comment at the top, or it'll be somewhere in here for you guys to watch. Thanks again, guys, for watching, and of course, until next time, stay class.